Okay, I'll call this joint City Council Urban Renewal Work Session to order. Please join me in the flag salute. Welcome, everyone. Carmen Matthews is online tonight, and Drew Farmer will be unable to attend, and I think Mayor Benetti will be online shortly. He's running a little late. The next item on the agenda is public comment. If anybody has a public comment that is not on the, for something that is not on the agenda, please come forward now. Hello, Jim.
I think the council is very well aware that latest estimates of probably 1,000 people have seen your meeting yesterday. Presentation by the city was very well done. Couple things need to be expanded upon. So the city manager mentioned that we had 119 built housing units since 2016. I've lived here for 20 years. We have had proposed development of over 1,000 housing units by various parties over those years, of which only 30 or so have been built. Subdivisions are started, they go away because of the economy. Someone goes through all the hoops of approving the subdivision through the water board, but they never turn it in because it doesn't pencil out. So addressing housing demand, what you have in the pipeline isn't even going to touch it. Not even going to touch it. Every single subsidized house that our city government has helped rental unit, helped finance, has rented almost before it was completed. All right? When you did the little short thing at the fire station, I believe it was Premier Property was your agent to help you rent those, or whoever was doing it, okay? And I watched them struggle to get the house cleaned because the people were gonna be there the next day. There's that much demand. Now, my particular sore spot, and then I'll leave it alone for right now, you gave 75 housing units away to short-term vacation rentals in residential areas. And I know that some of you go, oh, well, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. No, you don't. There is a ruling, Coos versus Cannon Beach. Your attorney knows about it. And city councils can put in force that restriction. Okay? You want to channel economic development here into commercially zoned areas and have stuff that's planned, then one of the things you need to do is take the short-term vacation rental piece and ban it in residential areas, period. We don't care about homestay. If Sarah wants to run a homestay in a residential area, the impact, in our opinion, is nearly nothing.
Get 1 minute.
Okay? Running a short-term vacation rental for Hilton, Marriott, Vacasa, Airbnb, all you're doing is skirting things. Skirting. You're just going through loopholes. Okay? Other communities have serious codes on where these things can go. And the message you sent to us is you don't care. You give 75 units of housing away if it all gets used, and you only built 119 in 7 years. Something seriously wrong with that. It's the people that live here first. Okay? The tourism is important, but it needs to be planned, and it needs to be done in such a way that their lodging is integrated into the existing commercial areas. There's no reason for us to be a hotel for Banded Dunes.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have,
President Miles, I am curious if, and I don't know if anyone has this number offhand, but the number of people that have put in applications for short-term vacation rentals. I think there was a sentiment that there wasn't going to be a flood of new applications, but I am curious what that,
We can
Looks
certainly
like-
get you that information.
thanks.
I actually already have it on my list here.
Great, thanks.
Does anybody else have a comment? Are there any more public comments? Doesn't look like we have any online either, so I'll move on to agenda item 3, review of the upcoming City Council and URA Board action items. And item A is discussion regarding Parks Master Plan update. Is this Carolyn? Carolyn, are you online?
I am, but Greg Hamlin will be presenting that.
Okay.
Good evening, Council. My name is Greg Hamlet, Operations Administrator for the City of Coos Bay. Back in May, Council and the Joint Council and the URA and the Parks Commission was asked to create a subcommittee. That subcommittee consisted of Park Commissioners, members Coco Sutton, Ariane Lyons, and Commission member Carmen Matthews as that subcommittee. So back on July 21st, the subcommittee put together their recommendations and brought it to the Parks Commission. And so tonight, we are bringing those recommendations to council, not only for feedback, but also direction. Council feedback and direction is requested on the Parks Commission recommendation regarding the development of the 2023 Parks Master Plan. The plan is to be consistent with council directives with a focus on preservation and enhancement of the city's existing facilities. Identify sustainable funding from multiple sources for future park and facility improvements and maintenance, and consider visitor community feedback in the plan correction or creation. Overall, the project is accomplished. This directive was presented to the Parks Commission on the 21st. The following items are for council's consideration. Item 1 is evaluate the Parks Commission recommendations. The Parks Commission reviewed the subcommittee recommendation of the 2023 through 2033 plan that focuses on existing facilities, but not replicate it in its entirety of the 89 pages. At the writing of this report, the 2013 plan and its appendices are proposed to be modified to some degree and serve as an appendix to the 2023-2033 plan. A draft preface, plan cover sheet, acknowledgement page by the Parks Commission is included in the attachments. Also included with attachments are 2 surveys. One is a local community survey that will be provided through the city's Friday update newsletter, the Facebook page, over the course of about 6 weeks. In addition to that, there are also 3 opportunities for the local and also a separate visitors survey to be proposed to the citizens. Those opportunities are 2 events at the Wednesday market that will take place on July 27th and August 10th. And the second one is the East Side Neighborhood Watch program, and that is scheduled for July 29th. So with the review of the survey, both the local and the visitor surveys, we are asking if there's any comments or any feedbacks to those so that we can get prepared for those upcoming events, so we can get those surveys completed in a timely fashion. Finally, the third item that we're looking to get comment on or recommendations on is to provide feedback on the draft schedule. The schedule is kind of a aggressive schedule as far as the master plan comes along. July 29th through September 2nd, Friday updates. It's up to 6 with a link to what is called Survey Monkey. Citizens will be able to review the survey and post their comments via that. Also, the staff has worked, or the subcommittee, I'm sorry, has worked with the Visitors Authority here about creating that visitor survey, and that'll also be posted down there at the Visitors Information Center. And so the 22nd, the Parks Commission public hearing on the draft plan. And then October 20th, the Parks Commission continued public hearing and formulation of recommendations for council. And finally, on November 1st, there's a tentative date for a joint council Parks Commission public hearing for review and action on the plan. And so if you look in your packets, you see that we have the cover sheet, the fiscal year 2023, and the 2 surveys, along with the acknowledgement page and the preface.
What are you trying to learn from the survey?
Sorry, ask that question again.
What are you trying to learn from the survey?
What are we trying to learn from the survey? Basically, what we want to know is how the citizenry and how the visitors view our parks and what they would like to see in those parks. And to also prioritize any upgrades to those parks, to the, not only just the amenities.
I'm not sure the survey gets at that.
I'm sorry?
I mean, the visitor survey, please indicate which city parks and/or Coos Bay attractions you would consider exploring, doesn't necessarily get at your outcome.
Oh,
Did you see this one?
for the visitors?
You're looking at the visitor one. There's one inside the master plan
Okay.
preface that's a little bit more.
While Counselor Stevens is researching that, my one question, and maybe I should know this, so forgive me. I see that we have the Sun Museum listed on that, as well as the Coos Art Museum. So does that fall under the Parks Master Plan? I was curious why that was added to the survey.
Yeah, and so they are city properties, and I believe, Carolyn, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they do fall under the park's purview.
Okay.
The city does that's correct. One of the reasons for that to be included in the visitor survey is that the VCB would like to get an idea of where visitors are having the most interest in the city and what types of things that they would. We're pretty unique on the coast in that we have multiple cultural resources that you don't see in other coastal cities. So Janice and I have spent some time talking about that. That's why visitor survey was put together the way it was. It's a bit different than the rest of the survey.
Okay, so really that was for the intent of the VCB for promotion purposes, correct?
It was, and that follows up on the council discussion where we wanted to include the visitor community as well. We really feel like that's a good piece of our economic development opportunity, and that was the takeaway we had from the council when we met with you early on.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So why would the VCB not also want to include the Coos History Museum and the Egyptian?
They can. We're
And the
looking
railroad
for
museum.
any suggestions, and those could be added.
I assume because maybe it didn't fall under the purview of the parks.
I think the Egyptian does, doesn't it?
It's very similar. While we own multiple facilities, and I would go this, we own the Sun Museum,
Right.
the Art Museum, and the Egyptian. We actually don't run any of those. We also own the property that the Historic Railroad Museum is on, but yet we don't run that. They're all very similar. And I think if we're trying to gather data on where people are going or multiple places they are going, I think it would be best to include them all. The History Museum itself, we have no ownership in. We did purchase and donate property to it, but we actually don't own it. But there would seem to be some value in at least knowing if, since that's our other cultural attraction, if you extend it to that, then would you then extend it to the Dolphin Theater, which is another attraction that we put a lot of effort in building, or at least remodeling.
Well, I just go back to what's the intention of the survey? Like, what are we trying to get out of it? And if the VCB is trying to understand where people are spending their time when they're visiting, then I think it would be prudent to include at least the Coos History Museum at a
Including
minimum.
what? I'm sorry?
I think it would be prudent to include the Coos History Museum in in the visitor survey. And I apologize, I did not see the local survey till now, thanks Stephanie. And I do think that that one is, does meet the intent.
I think that's fine for the visitors survey, but I would like to see the local survey focus on what parks they want to see
They own.
fixed up and
Yeah.
Have the local survey,
the local survey determine what parks are most important to the citizens to focus on?
Yes, it did. Part of the discussion early on with the council was to identify what we want to do with our existing parks and not really look at trying to expand into new park areas. And that discussion led on to, well, then we're going to want to see what the priorities are in the community. And that's why the survey was framed the way it is. So that's really what we're trying to get at. What are the priorities?
So number 1 says we're to evaluate the Parks Commission's recommendation. Is this the recommendation here? This is the preface?
Yes, it is.
yes, it is.
One thing I would like to see is the list of projects prioritized.
Could I get some clarity on that? Are you saying that
Well, in reviewing the
we'd
two,
like to have, we'd like to have the community prioritize which parks are most important to them?
no, not the community. In the Parks Master Plan, I would like to see the projects listed in there by priority.
Okay,
'Cause
I think that would be helpful.
the 2013 plan has several projects in there, but there is not really any priorities on them.
I think ultimately where we were going was through the survey, when the community identifies their priorities, we would use that information as a point of discussion for the planning commission, the Parks Commission, to make a recommendation to you based on what they hear from the community. So I think that we're saying the same thing. We want to end up in the same place, and the survey will ultimately help us get there when we have the community feedback.
Carolyn, with all due respect, and looking at the survey, I mean, there's 6 questions, and yes, I know we should keep the survey short, but to your point, when I'm looking at number 3, it's saying, okay, please check your 3 favorite parks, and then how you use the parks, but I think it's a stretch, those 2 questions, to give you all the information that you need to talk about further development of those facilities.
Well,
Maybe add a question about what would be your priorities in,
Well, we've got that, what
Development of
parks,
things
trails,
inside.
and cultural resource facilities should be prioritized for improvements. General comments are also welcome. I can tell you, I mean, how many people actually fill in general comments, right? So I guess that's my concern.
so creating another question that's built from the Parks Commission
Yeah.
that identifies things that they're hearing in the community that could be prioritized, projects inside of those parks
Yeah.
that could be prioritized.
Exactly.
And then in the date line that you have for the priorities, the 3 priorities, let me go back to that. Perhaps we add, what am I looking at here? Going back. You have number 3 on our cover sheet. Maybe you add something in there that identifies, I completely forgot where I was going with that. Sorry, I'll think of it. Keep talking. Sorry.
if I could share, and I'm wondering if Commissioner, if Coco is there
She is.
as well, because originally the question was prioritize which of these parks, are most important, and there's quite a few of them, and rank them. And the original plan in 2013 identified all of the features in the parks that people felt were important already. So if the idea was
She's here.
She's here.
In person. She's on her way up.
Good evening. My name is Coco Sutton, and I am on the subcommittee for the Coos Bay Parks Master Plan. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. When we were looking at this plan, the surveys were just an initial step to see if we were in the right direction of improving and enhancing what's already existing in the park master plans that we have, and not spending redundant times on things like, in the past, you had, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm not coming up with a dollar amount, a $40,000 grant, I believe, to do something similar to the State of Oregon Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. That's called SCORP. Each state is required to do that in Oregon, and they have a big pot of money. That document lives on the State of Oregon's Park and Recreation website, and they have a lot of money to go regionally and put focus groups together, ask specific questions similar to what we're seeing capsulized on this one-page document. Unfortunately, the grant that we put in for to help us repeat what was done in the 2013 Park Master Plan was not acquired, and that was to help get together, and also the time frame to have many focus groups in neighborhoods and outreach where your parks, your trails, your cultural facilities currently exist. Because we didn't have that opportunity, we were trying to streamline the process to meet the dateline we have. In the existing master plan, I believe in Chapter 6 is where the 2013-2023 identified many park wish lists, and we did request and received by the parks that are currently existing, not the 2013 wish list parks to be put online. What projects were completed and what projects had not been completed. So if we're in the right ballpark of identifying where people locally and perhaps visitors, and the key here was that flagship concept. So one of the things we mentioned was branding. When you come to Coos Bay and North Bend, they run together along with state and federal lands. You have the Dunes Recreation Area, you have state and federal lands. If you drive through Newmark, for example, you'll see the green sign that says John Toppitz Park, and you'll see a green sign that says Ed Lund Park. You'll also see green signs along Highway 101. In the past, a lot of the signage and color were branded for particular parks. U.S. Department of Agriculture, Forest Service lands, Bureau of Land Management, state and federal, and then the cities had their own brands. Coos Bay does have a brand sitting behind you, that very nice logo that we have, but if you're driving through, you cannot identify which parks belong to Coos Bay from any other parks. So one of the things we were looking at is on the local survey is to reach out and find out what do people locally have an interest in that's existing. Additionally, which areas are feeling underserved because we didn't have the funding or money to go after that. And the biggest key that I heard from everyone in this conversation was funding. We know that we lack the funding for having a lot of the things maintenanced on a regular basis that we need to in our parks, our trails, our boardwalk, etc. And in order to bring in those partners, whether it's a friends group, a memorandum of understanding with a corporation or a business, if you're going after grants through the state of Oregon Parks and Recreation because they received a large chunk of lottery money by voter mandate, and they use the SCORP, the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. They're currently working on that plan, so a lot of the data that you would get in the minutia of what are people doing for multimodal, what are people doing for outdoor recreation types, they're going to be getting that statewide. So what we were trying to do in a down and dirty way to meet the end of the year review is, can we reach out at farmers markets, at Neighborhood Watch, like the Eastside Neighborhood Watch, and quickly get a sense of what parks do you use or do you not use the parks and why. Item number 4, we were just looking at the current master plan to get the sense of the cultural facilities. If we're looking at the visitor survey, there's a lot more things that someone could or could not put on that. But again, you're looking at SurveyMonkey or online or in person, how much time is someone going to spend ranking? Generally, when you ask people to rank something 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you don't get very good results because it's too much effort. But if you try to focus someone on what are you really doing in a park locally, what are you really doing for parks that you like, you might get a better sense of where should you spend your limited dollars, or reach out to try to get a corporate sponsor or a friends group or a memorandum of understanding to fix those things that we already know since 2013 and before need to be fixed, but we've never had the funding to do it. So hopefully that helps you. If you have any other questions, I'm free to see if I can assist with that, but that's kind of the nutshell of what we were trying to do.
So I mean, in reality, what it is we're building on a plan that we have because we don't have unlimited funding to add things. So we're just building and fine tuning it is what I'm hearing. But I think we have a couple other opportunities to reach out, even though I know that they do bring in other people from other areas, but there's 2 major festivals in our community as well coming up before.
Yes. What we had done for the council, because we don't have permissions at this time and we're trying to make sure we're focusing on where you want to target your effort in the plan, was in the comment that was made about the opportunities for face-to-face surveys, which I believe is on your page 2, number 2, where it starts with comment on the draft local community. If you look down on the 3rd paragraph, it said there may also be an opportunity for face-to-face connections with residents or visitors. We do know there's the Blackberry Art Festival, there's the Family Fun, there's the Coos, there's the Oregon Music Festival. What we were trying to do with the limited staff that we have available on the committee is just in time approach each opportunity to see if they will allow us. The farmers market opportunity that we have coming up, they were very, very gracious to, number 1, waive the fees and let us have a date when it's the National Farmers Market Week recognition. And so that's why we just brought those in, because we had to wait to see if they would allow us to. So we do know that there's other opportunities to get the survey out, but the limit on the personnel that we have to do that and outreach is me and the subcommittee of 3.
Fun Festival might be a little difficult, but Blackberry Arts could be focused, and that might be one. But I sort of remember where I was going with my original comment, and that is, since we're just building, we have priorities inside of that plan that we currently have. This would help focus that and maybe provide an opportunity to have a discussion before we get to the review and the action on the plan. I think is that what you were looking for?
Yeah.
To have an opportunity to say, okay, well, we found some other priorities and prioritize that within that draft before it gets finalized and comes back to council for final review.
Yeah, absolutely. What we were doing with the preface is, before we spent a lot of time, 3 subcommittee members were assigned all the chapters that were in the existing plan. Many of them don't need to be replicated. The geology and geography of Coos Bay has not changed. So those things, for example, in Chapter 2, which is the planning guidelines, other than referencing things like SCORP or the watershed, because of funding opportunities is what we're focusing on, and partnerships, is that in Chapter 6 is where you get to the nut of, do we have a maintenance management plan? If so, what does that consist of? And by each park, what are the priorities from the 2013, 2014, there were surveys that were extensive because they had the staffing to do that. And then the outreach that we're doing now to see what's come up there. That would be presented. Carolyn, is that correct, as we get these chapters done, if they wanted to give us recommendations and more guidelines, we were going to move forward with presenting those chapters on our timetable.
I believe what we had in mind was we were going to draft and have the entire thing ready at our first Parks Commission meeting. And at the following meeting, we would take any direction we had received from the commission for revisions. It might be of value to see if the council would like to be a part of that second meeting that the Parks Commission is going to have, if there would be interest. It'd be some extra time, but that way you would be seeing it for the very first time before your meeting arises to take action on it.
I think that's a great idea. I just want to say, Coco, thank you. I have a much better understanding after your explanation. So with that said, I think it still would be nice, perhaps on the visitor survey. Councilor Stevens mentioned the Coos History Museum. It would be nice to add the Railroad Museum, as Roger had indicated, as well as the Egyptian. And then on, I know we were prefacing on the local survey, maybe just adding those two as well.
And
if we
did you
thought
want the
that made
Coos
sense.
Railroad Museum?
The Coos Rail, yes, please.
Yeah, the Coos Rail. So the Coos History Museum, the Coos Railroad Museum, and the Egyptian Theater.
Egyptian, yeah,
Okay,
just
and
add
those
those
should be
to
on
both.
both surveys?
Yeah,
Under the
that'd be great.
cultural?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
thank you.
Yeah, as long as it's not part of something that makes people believe that we do own those, I think we need to make that clear, because what we're doing is we're trying to deal with the stuff that we
Well, I think the
own.
I get
The
your point.
visitor survey, I think
Yeah,
you're.
the
yeah.
visitors don't care of it. From
But
the-
I think it also works two ways. It also publicizes that we have those facilities available.
Exactly.
So anyway, we can always let people know those are here.
And if I may ask your guidance, and if it pleases the city council, the local survey was the biggest send-off that we're trying to get approved tonight if possible. And the question that I have for you in looking at that, it said your responses will help identify community priorities for future fiscal decisions regarding park recreation and cultural facility improvements. Would you like those other three on the local survey as well?
Where does it say
I think
that?
that's the direction you were going, right?
On the local
Mrs.
survey.
Carroll, I'm sorry.
Well, I think they could be under cultural facilities. I wouldn't put them under the parks, the number 3, I'd put them under number 4.
Right.
Okay, but
under
that's
number
not on the
4.
visitors.
Yeah, that was my intent, Coco. Sometimes I'm not
Yeah.
very
No, that's
succinct.
fine. And the reason this survey, the local survey I can speak to, is looking at funding potentials. We did identify after our first meeting with you, and for several groups that we've heard from over the course of last year and this year, different private corporations, public opportunities for funding, for example, the skate park. There was a lot of opportunities that are particular to those facilities, such as the Tony Hawk's Foundation. A lot of those organizations, and there's some new ones that have come online, are very interested in items like number 2 and number 5 on the local survey. So that's why those are included,
Got it.
because they want to have a sense that, aside from referencing the SCORP that's currently being held and updated, we can use some local information that we gathered ourselves as a community to enhance that opportunity.
So do you think if we add the Coos History Museum, even though we don't own it, that's not going to jeopardize any potential funding for our cultural facilities?
My
Or
only,
theirs.
Yeah.
yeah, my only opinion is that if you're looking on the, in my opinion, on the local survey,
Yeah.
and Carolyn, you can jump in if I'm not conveying this correctly, is that we wanted to focus on the parks that are in the taxpayers of the city of Coos Bay's backyard, currently open and available for their use, including the trails, so that we could get a sense of what has been changed in popularity, usage, et cetera, from the original surveys, which were quite extensive by neighborhood and use, that were done in 2013, 2014.
Well, that's a very good point.
And to Counselor Kilmer's point, maybe it's just wordsmithing number 4 to say, please check the cultural facilities you use in Coos Bay. So then it doesn't imply that somehow we own the facilities, but they're in Coos Bay. And then that addresses your concern,
But
Counselor
it's,
Kilmer.
yeah, it definitely gets those on the survey because I think local people do use that. Do you think it would be beneficial to include the Coos Bay Downtown Association? I know that the members aren't necessarily citizens, but the owners of businesses. I don't know if that would be an opportunity to reach maybe another demographic, or would that muddy the water by having?
My personal opinion is the more people locally that are stakeholders or shareholders, usually when you see the SCORP or any of those plans, it's not just the people that live in Oregon. It could be shareholders, stakeholders, people that have some kind of vested interest. And since they are an organization that has a vested interest in the robust maintenance of these facilities we're speaking of, that could be another group with an opportunity for face-to-face outreach. And that's certainly the kind of feedback and guidance we're looking at you for, because you are the electorate and you have your pulse on a lot of things that we necessarily don't have access to.
And one other thing that I would add, I'm assuming that South 10th Street Park is Pirate Park.
It is.
And we should probably have that name like we do Empire Lakes John Toppett's Park. Maybe slash in there.
Great point. We'll do that.
Okay, so that one needs to be removed. These were copied from the surveys from last
No,
time.
not remove, just add that it's Pirate Park.
Oh,
It's actually a named park. Yeah. Or Pirate Park, South 10th Street Park with, as a locator.
I think people know it is Pirate Park now, correct?
Hopefully.
depends on who you talk to.
I don't know. Some people still call John Toppett's Park Empire Lakes, and if you say John Toppett's, they don't know. That's why I'm just saying if we had both of them on there.
Would it be okay to use the example here where it says Empire Lakes / John Toppett's? We could use South 10th Street or Pirate Park / South 10th Street.
Roger, don't shoot me. The cemetery, the Marshfield Cemetery, is that owned by the city of Coos Bay? Or
It is.
just because be nice to add that there as well. I don't know if people
It
go
is on
visit
here.
cemeteries, is it?
It is
Oh,
on
It's on the
wonderful. I
park.
did not
And
catch
actually,
that.
that's a very good point, because originally, when a lot of these cemeteries after the Civil War were planned and developed, they were parks. They were acres of park property in addition to the areas where people were buried, so that people could go out and sit and picnic or whatever. Our particular modern outlooks and traditions may have changed over the time, but they certainly were set up as parks. And I
Okay.
think if you look at the Masonic Park in Eugene and other areas, that's the historical sense of them when they're upgrading them.
Great, forgive me, I didn't catch it on the survey, so thank you.
I think Carmen's been waiting patiently. Did you want to comment, Carmen?
I've just been thinking about it and wanted to raise a question. It seems like there was difficulty kind of wordsmithing number 4 and including the cultural assets that we have in the Parks Commission, or in the Parks unit. And of course the cemetery is part of that as well. I was just wondering if, and I have no, particular opinion on this, but I'm wondering if the council was interested in mainly just focusing on the natural or like outdoor aspects of parks and just omitting those built cultural assets, or if you would like to indeed include all of those and then have that as part. At one point it was like, well, why are we involving the Sun Museum and all these things, as if it wasn't part of the parks purview, but we could just focus on natural parks or all parks. Just a basic question.
Yeah, I was curious about that too, Carmen. Like, are we trying to do too many things with this survey by including that? And does does including things around cultural facilities detour from the intention, which is to understand more about, how did you put it? Natural areas
Yeah,
versus
like the
built
natural
areas?
parks. Yeah, and so instead of focusing on buildings, more on just parklands, and I'm not sure if that's, one part of the direction that we want us to focus on or not, because we could just potentially omit that and maybe have it as a separate focus in the Parks Commission, but I do also believe that since these are park assets, they will probably be part of the master plan, but I could be wrong with that. Maybe Carolyn or Greg or Coco would speak to something about how this would shake down in the master plan.
Before the, oh, sorry, Carolyn, go ahead.
Well, I think that maybe we need to clarify some of the intent of the surveys, both of the surveys. It was our understanding that we wanted to include the visitor community as well, because it does somewhat relate to economic development if we get folks into our parks, but they can also get into the Egyptian theater and the museums, etc. In fact, the current Parks Master Plan talks about a lot of those cultural facilities as being under the, not all of them, but being under the Parks Commission purview. So even if you don't use that information for your natural resource type parks, it would be available when the time came when you want to do things with some of your cultural resources. If you had to make some choices when grants arise, things like that. So that would probably be the plus side to including them. But the downside is it's more work. But I think given that the work's going to be happening anyway, and it's not like we have, 25 cultural resources and buildings that you have to wade through for Joe Public who fills this out. It might be a good idea to handle it now. So.
I think that we personally, Carmen, I think we should keep it in. I would hate to take culture out of this, and I think that Carolyn said it much more eloquently that, there will be a time when we review this, and it would be nice to know how these facilities are being used, and potentially, if one of these groups came to us and wanted to try to get a grant, maybe some of this information in this survey would allow them to apply for a grant and get some funding. And I mean, honestly, thank you for the committee of 3 that's doing this. How many times are we going to do this? So I think we should kill 2 birds with one stone, so to speak, so we don't have to do it again in the future.
And just to add on to that, it gives us information too for the future of our facilities. I mean, we know we are going to be talking about the library again.
Correct. I will reiterate that the facilities listed here are in the current Parks Master Plan. The Egyptian Theater is not, and I suspect it's not because in 2013, we anticipated not being the owner of that.
Yeah.
But that didn't occur. And obviously, some things have changed because the direction of the library has changed since 2013. No longer are we looking at stabilizing the foundation and some other tactics, but those are listed in there.
Did anybody else have any questions or comments?
I would just add one more comment. If you're going to include the Downtown Association as a stakeholder group, which I think is an excellent idea, I think you should also include the Community Coalition of Empire.
And I was just thinking that, Sammy, do you think maybe the library could partner with these guys in at least administering the survey?
That's a great idea.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Have we made the decisions we need to make?
So one last thing I'd like to kind of add is in regards to the local survey and the visitor survey, the desire is to get out into the community at the Wednesday market starting tomorrow. Once again, Thursday with the Empire Community Watch, and then August 10th. If the requested changes to the local survey are made, can this survey be approved for use over the next couple of weeks?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody online opposed to that? I think you're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work, definitely.
Sorry, I lost my agenda.
Here we go.
The next item is discussion regarding summer-fall construction projects.
Thank you.
Is that you, Jen?
That's me. Over the last few months, staff's advertised for several bids. There have been difficulty in getting bids, and oftentimes we only receive one. And the bids that we do receive are about 30 to 40% or even more over the engineer's estimate. In speaking with our local contractors and consultants, they have a few ideas on why this is occurring. It's the supply chain issues that we've heard about, inflation, difficulty in obtaining workers, and a large backlog of projects. So recently, staff advertised the 3rd and Central Green Parking Lot project. This is a sponsorship option project. It proposes a parking lot with 14 spaces, sitting areas, landscaping, outside trash enclosures for local businesses, and an auxiliary power source for festivals and markets. While there were several contractors on the plan holders list, we only received one, and that was from First Cascade Corporation. They're off the I-5. The bid was almost double the engineer's estimate, coming just under $1.5 million. Engineer's estimate was $800,000. Staff called the local contractors who were on the bidders list but did not bid. And basically, the general sense was they just had a large backlog and they didn't need this project. So staff's recommending the green parking lot project be placed on hold and rebid next spring with the goal of obtaining more competitive bids. It is understood that by moving this bid or project a year out, there's going to be escalation. However, it's believed that the bids will be more in line with the engineer's estimate. So today we opened up we opened up a bid for 5th and Bennett. We received 2 of them, one from Lasky, Clifton, and one from Knife River. Knife River had a bid of $300,000. Lasky was $500,000. The engineer's estimate was $311,000. So we felt really good about Knife River's bid, but this is just an example how we can receive a bid that's in line with our engineer's estimate, but also receive one that's significantly higher. So next week, it was planned to bring 2 projects to council for consideration of award, the 5th and Bennett project and the 3rd and Central Green Parking Lot project. But at this time, staff is recommending keeping the 5th and Bennett on the agenda, but removing the 3rd and Central and rebidding spring 2023. So at this time, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, first off, I'm not sure that we should accept a project for if we only get one bid and it's that far over the engineer's estimate. Do you guys have any questions or comments?
I just support it's hard to justify if the engineer's estimate is $800K and this bid is nearly 1.5. I agree with staff's suggestion of just taking it off the list and rebidding it at a later time.
It doesn't jeopardize any funding that we have set aside for the project.
No, we spoke to our lender, who's DEQ, and they are fine with that.
And I think that's probably the best move. It's almost double.
So was the 5th and Bennett storm drain project pretty close to the engineer's estimate?
It was only $11,000 away, so it's like 5%.
Any other questions or comments? It sounds like so far we agree with the staff recommendation. Joe or Carmen, do you have a comment?
I agree with the staff recommendation also. I concur as well.
Okay, I guess you got it. Did you have a comment, Roger? You look
None.
like you had a comment.
I'm ready
Okay.
to go for the next one.
All right, the next item is review of the Psilocybin Service Act.
Yes, in November of 2020, a ballot measure, 109, came before the voters, and it was about the Oregon Psilocybin Service Act, which basically, if approved, and it was, established psilocybin manufacturing and service centers, and which is derived, of course, from certain mushrooms. The act provides that the Oregon Health Authority should or would adopt and regulate the field, which includes manufacturing, delivery, sales, purchase, and the use of the drug in a service center. They can't sell it and take it away. They actually have to use it at this service center. The Oregon Health Authority would be the regulating authority for the product, and they were charged with producing rulemaking. To date, they have not completed the rulemaking to that. Measure 109 was very restrictive. It provides that the city could adopt an ordinance which could be referred to the electors of the city to either prohibit the establishment subject to the jurisdiction of the city. It's called an opt-out provision, and a referral to the electors would have to be made at the next statewide election, which for us is this November of 22. You actually have 4 different options. You could take no action, and the Oregon Health Authority will continue to establish the rules, and the citing of those businesses would be based on their rulemaking, which we don't know what that will be yet. Secondly, you could direct staff and the city attorney to prepare documentation to refer to the voters to ban such businesses within the city. Third, you could direct staff with the city attorney to document a temporary ban for such services. This is more of a wait and see approach, see what they come up with. After such a ban, let's say it's 1 or 2 years, my guess it would be 2 years because you go to the next general election. Then you would have to go back if you wanted then to ban them. So that would be a 2-step process should you decide to go that route. And then the other one is to adopt time, manner, and place, or basically development code or zoning to where you would want these type of businesses to be located. I can tell you that many cities right now are electing to go to either a ban or a moratorium and take it to the voters and let the voters decide should they want it within their jurisdiction.
If we were to do that, it wouldn't be on the November ballot, would it?
It would be.
What is staff recommending and the attorney?
Well, it's certainly difficult to see what's happening in our community with the results of ballot measure 110. I can tell you that we are preempted from charging a sales tax, and therefore, and I do believe that there will be increased services rendered if those businesses occur in the city. I personally have seen people under the influence of such drugs during my time in law enforcement, and it's pretty scary. And some of them needed medical aid. I think it is the safe approach to either go with a moratorium for 2 years or to consider the outright ban. That would be my suggestion.
But the ban goes to the voters.
Both the ban and the moratorium, either or, go to the voters.
Okay.
So can you speak to why this is an option for ballot measure 109, but it's not an option for 110?
The only reason is that's what was written in the ballot measure.
So if either one goes to the voters, either the moratorium or the outright ban goes to the voters, and the voters say a majority passes that, you live with that decision.
That is correct. So as far as the November 2020 election, countywide, that measure failed. Citywide, it narrowly passed.
But you could always still come back with the time, place, and manner, right?
You certainly could.
Regardless.
So you could take it to the voters and then come back with a time, place, manner? Is
You
that what you're asking?
could. You'd have to get, you'd have to know that there may be some that get in before then, because they're going to start taking applications in in January of 2023.
I'm in support of the ban.
So I have a question, Roger. Can we do, go ahead and ban and start going ahead and doing time, place, and manner now? Put it in place in case it does pass, or doesn't, then doesn't pass?
You could certainly do the background work for time, place, and manner, and have that ready, and then you would have to adopt it after the results of the election.
Did you say what the county did? Didn't they have that on their agenda?
I didn't look and see. I know North Bend is moving forward for a ban.
I don't
I
think
think
Coos County actually made a decision. They just initially talked about it, and it's coming up again in another meeting.
Oh, I thought they had.
I thought they had two.
I thought they had
They were
referred it to
putting it to
voters, but I
voters.
wasn't sure if
Yeah.
it was a ban.
And I believe Myrtle Point is looking at a ban, and I know that Coquille is talking about it, and so is Bandon. Actually, many cities across the state are doing the same thing.
Because it doesn't come with any funding to support, like what we see with marijuana shops.
Correct, and I think there is still maybe a little bit of heartburn over what's happened with the marijuana revenue. And we'll talk about it here in a minute when we talk about legislative priorities, but at one point in time, the city's share of the state tax for marijuana was for 1 year was $166,000. Last year, because of changes in the rules, it was $25,000.
Do you need a decision tonight, or will you bring this to council at the next council meeting?
So where we need to go, in order to get this on the ballot for November, we'll need to have a decision by direction from the council by the second meeting of August. That means we would need to bring you an ordinance. So if we back that up on a clock or a calendar, then we would need to get you that ordinance by the second week of August, which the first week of August is next week.
Next week, got it.
So you said that this failed county, but it never was
Yes.
city residents?
2 years ago, of course, there's a little bit more experience with the voters on unintended consequences.
Yeah. And you did say that North Bend is working on a ban, Bandon's working on a ban, Myrtle Point's working on a ban. So potentially, if we did not proceed with the ban, we might be the only city that might allow it.
Could be, and I don't know for sure if they're going to consider a ban or a moratorium, but
Okay.
they were all looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
But they all have the same thing, where it would need to go to voters, and then it's up to voters, and then they would need to live with it, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so if the city of residents of Myrtle Point decided they did want it, then that's what would stand.
Correct.
So if we proceed forward to send it to voters, and I think it was Joe that asked, we could start working on time, place, and manner, because there is a process that's going to take place. They're going to start accepting applications. The sooner, should that pass, we had time, place, and manner in place, then we'd be able to maybe grandfather fewer in with what we hear from the citizens.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? And we do
I like
need,
the idea of moving forward with a time, place, and manner discussion or consideration at the same time, moving forward.
is that what you need, Roger? Is that consensus then from us, so you don't?
Yeah, I'm not hearing anybody with a different opinion, so I will take that as consensus. We actually have some model language that's been provided to us from League of Oregon Cities. This becomes such a hot topic that the League of Oregon Cities produced information on it. So we'll be able to provide you some information next week to make sure we can make our timelines.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Next item is discussion regarding 2023 legislative priorities ballot with League of Oregon Cities.
So every time that the legislature comes into session, the League of Oregon Cities works to create and establish priorities for which it will lobby on behalf of its city members. The League of Oregon Cities put together 7 different policy committees, and each one of those policy committees came up with several different potential priorities. The League of Oregon City has now asked and provided all of those, and I believe it's 29, it's nearly 30, different options for you, and they're asking for each city to vote for their top 5. So I would tell you that even though you're only, in essence, looking at your top 5, I would be remiss if I didn't share with you that many of these things will come up anyway, regardless whether it's a city, a lobbyist that does it, or it's already issues on the radar of the state elected officials. We did put together, in fact, I think I sent you an email today. Both the assistant city manager and myself each individually looked at those, and we chose what we thought would be our top 5. And I don't have that email in front of me, but I can tell you the number 1 thing was local funding to address homelessness, infrastructure funding to support needed housing, let me get to it. I'm not seeing it right there, but it was work related.
Return to work.
Yeah, return to work. One of the struggles, not just government, but every organization that's trying to hire personnel is finding adequate and qualified workers that are willing to work. We hear about what's been now labeled the Great Resignation, where a lot of people left the workforce. Part of it the baby boomers, and those people that left during the pandemic which didn't come back, and left a severe shortage of personnel. Because of some changes in the state PERS system, the legislature adopted a short-term window which it allowed PERS retirees to come back to work. It does provide, 1, additional workforce. Secondly, it does provide some savings to that local entity that hires that retiree, because that workforce does not, or the employer does not have to pay the 6% PERS requirement for the employee. They still pay the employer's portion. The retiree gets no additional benefit. What that does, though, is that goes down and pays down an organization's unfunded liability. So it does have a way, depending how many PERS retirees are hired back, of limiting severe rate increases. At least that's the hope. One of the things that the LOC's been asked to do is to ask the legislature to remove the sunset date of December 2024 to allow more people. Now you might ask, how many people do we have currently? So we had a former chief that was on that. We currently have 2 battalion chiefs that are working for 18 months. on that, and that allows for some transition. And then, of course, I am on that as well.
So if we pursue this, then we might be able to keep those people longer? Is that what I'm hearing, Roger?
Well, it might provide us opportunities down the road past 2024 to take advantage of other persons that may be nearing their retirement. We have a number of retirements in the law enforcement. I'm not sure that any of those would take advantage of it, but it just gives us a different opportunity, and it doesn't have to be from here. What if it's similar to what North Bend's doing, where they've hired 2 retirees from Coos Bay to assist them for a set period of time? We don't know if we won't be in the position where all of a sudden we're without a critical position, but we've created a greater pool of potential candidates if we can get a temporary worker in or someone that's looking at a secondary career.
Well, if you were willing to guarantee one of those 4, I think, positions were willing to stay longer, I would be in full support of putting this as one of your...
I'm sure we can find somebody in another department.
So one of the items that wasn't on your list, and it seems important after last night's meeting, is address Measure 110 shortcomings.
I anticipate, and part of my email to you was that I thought there were going to be a number of items that the legislature will take up automatically, and I wouldn't want you to waste your vote if it's an automatic. Well, nothing's an automatic. It is certainly a hot topic among the cities right now, and overdoses and usage is way up, and unfortunately the other half of that bill is not effective. Money's not going out to treatment. People are not seeking treatment. They're using the process to get around the system, and it seems like it's just giving people permission, even though it's not technically legalized. It's almost so decriminalized that it's not a crime. Well, it isn't a crime, but there's no impacts.
But is money not coming to cities yet because of state procurement holdups, or is it?
Yeah, and I would say they're not going to the treatment facilities. The cities won't get any money off of 110. That's almost all now going towards treatment alternatives.
Adapt and...
There's no real incentive to go into treatment. The courts used to use the criminal side of drug possession to, in essence, put people into treatment. And even then, that was very difficult and didn't always work, but it did work on some occasions. But if someone doesn't want to go to treatment, they're not going to.
But they weren't, I mean, in my opinion, those smaller, lesser drug cases, I mean, those individuals were not seeking treatment anyway, and we were criminalizing them and costing taxpayers money that way also. So, I mean, it's lose-lose.
Yeah, it's there are certainly different theories and beliefs on this, and
I mean, I do agree that I think that there are some components of Measure 110 missing. I just also believe that we haven't, because of holdups with procurement at the state offices, we haven't given it a chance to see if it works yet because the funding hasn't been flowing yet.
I think some people are skeptical because we have seen what has changed with the marijuana stuff, and I think the public is, you know, I mean, we heard it loud and clear last night. It's the report that was given by staff and what we're hearing, the frustrations from citizens, it's all the culmination of a lot of things. So I think that's where the public is, the citizenry that we represent understands what you're saying, but they also understand the other side too, and they're skeptical.
I just think that it was already the case before. Like, there's no change, and now we have an opportunity to bring funding in to support treatment and so brain centers and like a different outcome, and we just haven't had a chance to see if that works yet.
State needs to be faster than.
Absolutely, yeah. Procurement needs to be staffed differently.
So, you know, if I had my wish and I could see something change, property tax reform would be top on my list. But surveys already say that that's not the political will of the elected in Salem. So in my mind, that's a wasted vote. I don't agree with lodging tax flexibility. I know that there are some communities that would love to see some of the rules taken off and used as they wish. I think the way the rules are designed right now and how the city is using them, I think that works very well for us. And sometimes some sideboards and guidelines are really important.
I think that also helped when we went out for, when the VCB went out for Charleston, that having those limitations on that was a key for them, that it can only be used a certain way. So I think not voting.
We shared the last two with you on our list, which was marijuana taxes and alcohol revenues. They are really, in the grand scheme of things, may seem like small things, but they really add up. As we shared last night, all of the taxes that are gathered in the city, as far as property taxes, aren't enough to pay for police and fire as it is now. So we have to use other revenue sources to fill in those gaps. One of those has been the marijuana tax. Oregon has a 17% marijuana tax. When it first came through, 10% of that was divvied up among the cities. And that's 10% of the revenues after it paid for its oversight through OLCC. And as I shared a few minutes ago, at one time we received $166,000. And now we're down to 25. Well, you add that to the fact that most recent changes to OLCC on alcohol taxes, we just dropped from a high year of 357,000 to 275. You add those two losses together, we're talking about a position. And it's those small amounts, they make a big difference to us. So cities are looking for some changes in the both the marijuana and alcohol revenues, and those might be within the appetite of the legislature to make changes on. So with that, I've shared you with our thoughts, but in reality, it's about your thoughts, and it's about what the council collectively thinks.
Mayor, do you have a comment on this?
You do, I mean, so one realm, I think, when we choose, I think Roger suggested some good comments or suggestions, but I also want to let you know that I spoke with Representative Wright, and he's willing to meet with us and take some ideas to the legislature and bills. So I think we have maybe a prompt approach that we can do. He's willing to do that. He just needs to meet with us by like the second week in August. So I think there's two ways to go about this.
Did you see they have a road user fee on here?
Yes, I did. I don't have the list right in front of me. I reviewed it earlier, and unfortunately I had some internet problems, so I had to run down the coffee shop. But anyway, so I don't have that list in front of me. But, I think homelessness is huge. I think drug abuse are things that we need to keep an eye on. And so any of those I definitely put on the list, and I think it's important if we, get some kind of income like Roger suggested about the marijuana bill. We've been squeezed on it, and I bet it goes away. We're at like 25,000, and we should be 166,000. I think this is important if we're going to have it.
Thank you. So let me put it this way. Does anybody against Roger and Nicole's recommendation?
Appreciate the work.
I like Joe's comment, though, that the opportunity to sit down with Representative Wright, to your point, addressing the shortcomings of Measure 110, I think that would be something that we could talk to Representative Wright on.
Maybe we develop a sub-list, because there's some good information in this piece that they
Yeah, that's a
sent.
great point.
Yeah. We can,
Yep, and I think another one that we'll want to talk to him about is possible changes to the Oregon Revised Statute involving the multi-unit property tax exemption, so that we can expand it more than a quarter mile from established transportation routes.
Roger, you mentioned, this might be off topic, so I apologize. You mentioned there's a group of people already working on a sobering center in this community, so we wouldn't need to address that with like funding from Representative Wright?
It's possible it may qualify for funding through the ballot measure 110 funding.
Okay,
Because that in essence is somewhat of a treatment, that's a first step.
right.
But there are a number of groups, and actually there appears to be some funding. We need to get that project across the finish line, and there are many people that's been working on it.
Okay.
I have a staff person that sits on the local Drug and Alcohol Planning Commission. She's the vice chair of that, and so I get to hear lots of the updates that they're talking about. They're currently going through a strategic planning process to prioritize next steps with the funding that the burn funding that they're receiving through Measure 110, that supposedly starting to flow pretty immediately. And so I think that it would be great to have that group come and present about what they come up with for their strategic priorities.
That's a great suggestion.
yeah, I like it.
Well, I think I have direction. And I've received communication while we were talking. We'll actually be bringing the ordinance regarding psilocybin to you at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, that's the end of our agenda. Do we have any other comments?
I just want to thank Mayor Benetti, the staff, Councilor Kilmer, and Councilor Farmer for heading up a pretty intense meeting yesterday. I think it was great to provide transparency to citizens and give people opportunity for input. And I know I'm still decompressing a little bit, so I can't imagine how the people in the room felt, but it's important to have those types of conversations in community forums.
I would echo that, and I was on this side. It was incredible to walk into this room and see that many people. I know I'm kind of weird that way, but that means people were engaged, and even though it was intense at certain points in that meeting, it got everything out on the table from what we are dealing with as a city and what the frustrations are. And it's a place now where we can say, okay, let's sit down and let's talk about this and get this rolling. There were several suggestions made afterwards that I think we can bring to the homeless work group, and I've had several conversations today. And I'm sure that others of you have also had those conversations. It's an engaging topic, and I think even though it was sometimes difficult, I think Mayor Benetti and our staff and the people that came did a really good job of listening and communicating, I guess is the best word.
I agree 100%.
I agree as well. I'm still stymied, and I bet Councilor Kilmer would agree, because we're always about communications. You know, we've got, what, 5,000 people on the Coos Bay update. We've got Facebook. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a full-page ad in the World newspaper that lists that. Because I still feel like that is a challenge for us, and I don't know. I don't have a solution.
As
So-
far as what our council has
what
done with the
we've
work
done,
group,
right.
that is probably the most common thread that's come up today. I want to sit down with you and hear more about
Right.
what you're doing. I'm a business owner, or I'm a citizen, and I didn't realize that all these things were happening, and we barely touched
Right.
a lot of the things that have happened that have come from that group to the council. And I think I think if we could figure out a way to get it out there.
And I honestly don't know if it's a full-page ad, whatever it is, I feel like we've got to do it, because, of course, I think I'm going to think about it. I'm going to ask staff to think about it. I think that the staff has done such an exceptional job, and people should know that the city is leading in this space and continues to lead in this space. I just don't know what it is, so I don't know if any other of the counselors have any suggestions on what it might be.
Well, I
that's
think,
the million-dollar question, right? Can you get people to?
go ahead, Mayor.
So, yeah, I want to thank everyone for attending the meeting last night, and the staff and the counselors that were there. And you know, we got some good ideas. We got a sobering Senate was mentioned. We've got some other suggestions that on how to help. I think we just need to keep having a conversation. At the end of the meeting, you know, I said I wasn't so sure I wanted to have another town hall meeting after the, you know, what we had gone through. But being truthful about it, I think that we need to have more of these, maybe a little more frequently. You got to remember, we haven't had this for what, over 2 years. COVID, you know, put a crimp on us getting together with individuals, and I just think there's just a lot of frustration that was built up. And I think it was necessary to have people come out and vent and let us know how they felt. And so, just when we went to the tough issue, I just want to remind everyone we had multiple meetings, and we kept bringing it up and discussing it until everyone felt comfortable that we had covered all the issues. And I think we just need to get it out there. I'm not sure how, if Lucinda's talking about, you know, getting it out with the world or whatever else, or our own internet and social media aspects, but I think having more meetings, and we just have to think about it, how to get there. Even though we had some difficult individuals that really didn't comprehend some of the problems that we have and how to resolve it, what we can and cannot do, we did have a lot of good individuals, had some great ideas, I think that we may even want to think about getting a committee together to sit down and discuss on how we want to move forward on this. Just, you know, that's a thought.
One more thing that I thought of off the top of my head is I think that the council needs to address, we have had some people that have left that committee, that work group, and I think there's an opportunity to enhance that group because it really is a think tank. It's like, they toss stuff around and they have topics. They don't talk a lot, but when they do get involved, they really mull it over, and they have great suggestions or things that we need to take away from that. And I think there's an opportunity. We do need to get a legislator on there. We do need to. Our person who was homeless at the time has actually gotten a job and moved away, has created a career. So we need to look for those opportunities to replace those people, because they do provide a well-rounded perspective for us.
Well, Representative Wright seemed very committed to this, so maybe he's the next person you reach out to.
I think he's been to our meetings as well.
Carmen, you look like you have something to say.
I just wanted to jump in and join in the choir and thanking the council members and the mayor who were present. And yeah, it's a long discussion. I know I don't have the answers, but I think collectively we can make, you know, positive moves forward. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who was there yesterday and came out to hopefully find a productive way to make our community better, safer, yeah, it's a tough subject. So let's all hang in there, keep moving forward, keep pushing the ball forward.
Thanks, Carmen.
Yes, someone said, keep on keeping on.
All right, with that, I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Night, Mr. Mayor.